in the United States, how does the CDC officially define AIDS?
Okay. We actually define AIDS, AIDS as basically any person presenting with a CD4 count of less than 200 and or in the absence of CD4 count, an opportunistic infection. And there are a series of different opportunistic infections that one could get that would make them qualify for AIDS. One is pneumocystis pneumonia, and another one would be disseminated cytomegalovirus and others.
I was interviewing a few people in Health Canada, and they don't recognize the 200 count. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, in the U.S., I think some of the reasons for it relates to the activist community were very concerned that there were a large number of folks that were HIV infected that were ill but didn't meet criteria for AIDS and thus were not eligible for certain resources. And so I think through some input from the activist community and so forth, that in the U.S. we lowered the criteria to include asymptomatic people with CD4 counts, but there are a number of countries that don't use that as criteria.
Why is AIDS in Africa defined differently?
I think it's partly related to the technology that's available in industrialized countries versus what's available in Africa. We have the ability in the U.S. because we are a richer country to do CD4 counts. We have the ability to do diagnostic tests that allow us to identify various opportunistic infections. In many countries, the technology and the resources don't exist to do that, so you end up using a clinical case definition, which in most cases represents the most severe form of the disease.
What is the percentage of presumptive diagnosis being used in Africa as opposed to the actual antibody testing?
Well, I think you may have heard, well, you weren't sitting in many of the sessions today, but we estimate that there's 36 million people around the world that has HIV/AIDS infection. About 25 million of those are in Africa. 95% of those people don't know that they're HIV positive, meaning that they don't have access to an HIV antibody test.
So how does one come to the conclusion that those 25 million do have HIV without actually? It's
based on data that have been collected in special surveys, and this we conduct special surveys, and then using those special surveys, you then do modeling and make estimates of the number of people that are infected, and these estimates, these estimates are fairly good, and the methodology that we use for making these estimates is very solid. But again, these estimates are only as good as the data that you put into them, and in some countries where the surveillance system is not as good, the estimates are not as strong. But basically it's based on surveys and taking those data and then estimating them, and then making estimates of what the general prevalence is in the population.
President Thabo Mbeki will officially open the AIDS conference tonight. Delegates here are hoping he will finally separate himself from the AIDS denialists.
We remain convinced of the need for us better to understand what would constitute a comprehensive response in a context such as ours, which is characterized by high levels of poverty and disease. As I listened and heard the whole story told about our own country, it seemed to me that we could not blame everything on a single virus.
Let me just say, I'm not sure that I'm not sure he's questioning. I mean, what he's my perception of what's being said is that he wants to have open dialogue about all possibilities regarding the etiology regarding the potential etiologic agent of AIDS. I think what he's and so I think there's been lots of information out there about misinformation about what he's actually saying. But what I think his main goal is to link poverty to the entire epidemic. I mean, I think that he has said some things that I think were not based on good science. I think the evidence is there's good scientific evidence that, I mean, there's strong. I mean, there's no doubt in most people's mind that AIDS is caused by the HIV virus, and there's good evidence to support that. But I think that I would agree with him in saying that HIV/AIDS is not. I mean, HIV/AIDS is a disease of poverty, and poverty is what's driving the epidemic in many of the countries. I mean, it's in this country, probably 10 years from now, poverty is going to be, the HIV/AIDS is going to become a disease of disenfranchised people. So, but anyway, that's probably all I should say about that.
Some people are very fortunate that they don't have these side effects. So what